Welcome to a tier list like no other. People have made tier lists of characters, of foods, drinks, games, but I don't think anyone's ever made a tier list of a single game throughout its years. Patches, maybe, but this is an unreleased game. This is a tier list of my favourite versions, or perhaps just the best versions, because this is the only opinion that matters, of the Bazaar. The Bazaar is a game that is yet to be released, was started way back in 2017, 2018. I'm going to be comparing the Bazaar from every year throughout its very tumultuous development, and deciding which of those was the best Bazaar. So let's get into this incredibly meta tier list. Okay, so we have 2018 Bazaar, 2019 Bazaar, 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2020 whenever the fuck it's going to be released. Maybe 2030 something. I probably shouldn't have put 2020X there. I should have put just X, because it might be 2030 by the time this game's out. Who knows? Anyway, I digress. 2018, the base game. First and foremost, this is what it looked like. This was the Bazaar back in 2018. Conceptual build, not actual gameplay. So, how did this game work? This is a very Dominion-esque game for anyone that's played Dominion. You had a sort of store in the middle where you could buy cards to add into your deck or add into your discard pile that would eventually get shuffled into your deck that you could then play with on following turns, and you just had to get your opponent's life down to 0. There was you had like 5 gold cards in your hand, very reminiscent of Dominion and other deck builders like that, that you could use to buy these different cards up, but you'd have to play the gold to buy the card. There were also a couple of NPCs that you could go and kill on the far right of the board. You had to manage the damage you could do per turn, plus the gold you could use per turn, plus your health, plus the enemy's health. You both had a shielding value. There was a discard pile, a draw pile, the gold cards, and the shops. That this game had a lot of things going on. And at this point, I don't think Reynad had figured out that he wanted to make a digital card game. I think he just knew that he wanted to make a card game. In 2018, he was not making a digital card game, and this is the result of it. It is crazy, and he was already playing around with toys in the corners, can you believe? So, 2018 Bazaar, where are you going? It's got to be relatively low, but I think I have to take it into consideration that this was just the very first iteration. It was never going to be good, so I'm going to put it in C. I don't think it's quite F. Like, for an obvious starting point, there are much worse places to have gone, so I'm going to put it in C. It's definitely not the game I would want to play. If I want to play that, I'll go and play Dominion. But, and there's a big but, it's not terrible as a starting position. Moving on into 2019, we have this version of the Bazaar. This was a little bit more refined, and there were cleaner versions of this that appeared later on. But in effect, it is a cleaner version of what we just saw. This is, what, basically a year later, maybe? 9 months. We have a very similar setup. The board looks a lot cleaner because it has actual art. Art always improves a game, right? But no. The game is getting, I don't know, better, worse. At this point, you had not only starting gold that would appear in your hand, but there was also starting damage swords. There may have been that in the previous version, I don't know. But basically, all of the early turns were just playing your full hand out so that you would get like 4 coins and 2 damage, and you'd ping the enemy for damage, and you'd use the gold to buy a card. And it wasn't until you'd gone through this loop a couple of times you actually had cards to play with. At this point, it is still very much Dominion. We haven't really progressed, other than we now also have the extra option of a hero power. So on top of all of the nonsense we still have the random mobs that you can kill, we still have the discard and draw piles, we still have all the crazy inputs that you have to do just to get the simplest of things done. We also now have a hero power as well that you can also spend gold on. At least it's immediately accessible, I guess. But at this point, I wasn't super interested in the game. I mean, I was still interested. I loved Dominion. I wanted to see what could happen if that was built purely digitally. This wasn't it. And obviously we know that now, right? That's the power of hindsight. But looking back on it, this might be the worst stage that the Bazaar was in. And I have a reason for this, right? So let's go back to our tier list. You might just say, okay, Greg, well, if 2019 was just 2018, but with pretty art, it should be C, if not better, right? I would disagree. 2018, they basically made Digital Dominion, plus some NPCs, plus some extra, like, hand stuff that you have to do. It was just needless complication. 2019, they still have the same needless complications. Like a year of development later. It was a very, very small team working on at this point. That's fair. They had other shit to do. They had to, like, try and get some investors on board and whatever. I'm tentatively going to... You know what? I'm going to put this one at the far right of C. And if I don't put any of the others in F before the end, I'll move it down. Because this is, so far, off the top of my head, the worst version of the Bazaar we've had. Because it showed no signs of progress. At least on the surface level. That was 2019. 2020 is when we really start to see things shaking and moving. This is 2020 Bazaar. 2020 Bazaar saw a huge shift. 2019 to 2020 was massive for the game. We also had a pandemic at the same time, which is kind of insane that we made the biggest shift during the pandemic. But compare this to what we just looked at, the potential worst place the Bazaar was in. Reynad and Big Ben 420, as you can see playing this game here, made a huge shift for the game. The game has now moved away from being a deck drafting 1v1 battler. It's at this point still a 1v1 battler, don't get me wrong. But now it's an auto battler. You don't have needless amounts of inputs after you've already done the needless amounts of inputs to get the strategy down. So it's an auto battler and a board builder rather than a deck builder. This came through a bunch of different ideas that they were having. The inputs were just insane, so they had to drop those. They ended up testing out this auto battler style and found that they actually quite liked it. Then the whole idea of like decks shuffling through one another wasn't really working, so they landed on the board. A lot of different, very, very high-level conceptual conversations happened to make the leap from where we were to where we are here. Between 2018 and 2019, they worked on polish, basically, right? They took it from a very, very paper beginning concept and created a vertical slice. They did some coding, they did some art. They just put it down into a game to see what they had. While that's a step forward in development, I don't think it's a step forward in terms of the game. Between 2019 and 2020, they jumped back to the beginning, tackled the very, very high-level ideas of what do they actually want to create. It's digital first, it's digital only. They do want some sort of builder, but it doesn't have to be a deck builder. It could also be a board builder. They want the focus, the onus, to be on this Bazaar, the buying phase. When you're actually going to the Bazaar, you're creating your strategy. So the needless inputs and complications from battle, that can just be taken over by automatic systems. The focus should be on building your strategy. They made all these crazy high-level decisions in just a single year. For that genius alone, I think I'm going to put 2020 Bazaar in A. It's not a step above. It's not S. It's not S. And I was going to jump ahead towards what S was, but I'm going to save that for the end because we'll get there. It's not the best version of the Bazaar, but it definitely is definitely up there. It is one of my personal favorite versions of the Bazaar. This is the version of the Bazaar that made me go, shit, I am making content for this game. And for that, I'm going to promote it to S, but it's not going to be my number 1 S. I'm going to have 2 in S tier. This is the game. This is the version of the game that made me start making content for the game. I was already watching it. I'd already backed it. Whatever. This was the version of the game that I was like, yes, I am in 100%. 2021. That saw some more changes. This was 2020. This is 2021. We've started to evolve the idea. This is a better transition than 2018 to 2019, where we just saw them put art and put code down on top of a system that was already there. This was them developing their system. They started reiterating their system. The gold costs were reworked. The health, the 1v1 element was completely reworked. In 2020, you were both drafting from a similar pool, or at least you were both drafting at the same time, and it was a locked lobby. It was just you versus them. 2021 is when we saw the start of the idea of the infinite lobby system, the asynchronous gameplay. We had that concept, that idea. That was starting to be founded. There were still a lot of problems with this version of the game. There were still a lot of things they hadn't worked out. But this is getting much closer to the product that we have today. Now, at this point, you'll see those numbers underneath the cards in the center. That's the leveling system that we had. This was their way of getting you to spend extra gold to power up your items. At this point, they had a very solid base for the game, but they definitely still had some problems, like board fluidity. No one was selling their items because they would invest levels in them and then they would hold on to that item forever. There was different levels of power creep. They still only really worked on Pygmalion at this point. Pygmalion and Vanessa, maybe. They had, as you can see, no idea what to do with duplicate cards. You just got to use 2 of them. We have 2 boomerangs here. So the power was completely off balance. They'd just about figured out what they were doing in terms of the day system. So you see all this stuff over on the left-hand side. We had the different elements of the day. We had different encounters rather than just merchants. And then you would have this battle at the end of the day, and whoever got to day 10 won. So there were some more conceptual jumps, but they hadn't made any massive leaps. So, where do I want to put 2021 Bazaar? It's not a massive drop off of 2020. In my head, when recalling all of this, I was like, you know what, 2021 Bazaar, that's like what did they do? But I completely forgot about asynchronous. The asynchronous play came in 2021, not 2022. 2021 was a big year for the Bazaar. They did do a lot of good things. Doesn't look anywhere near as polished as it does today. But yeah, I do think I was going to put it in B, but I think I am going to put it in A. They did make a lot of good changes. There were still a lot of glaring issues, but they were ones that they were obviously going to get to. They were just working their way through the game. And the team was still relatively small back then. Usher in 2022, the team starts to grow. We go from our relatively polished looking game to a much better looking game. Just look at the lighting difference alone. Like, this game board has virtually no lighting on it. I mean, it has the basic lighting on it, right? There are some shadows in places, but they're like shadows on the specific elements and they're not universal. We have like proper universal light sourcing on this map. We have beautiful art, really vibrant colors. They've brought the visual aspect of the game forward a lot. We have a lot more cards, NPCs, encounters, classes. We've fixed, we've got the shiny and fancy thing going on now. They've kind of figured out what they're doing with rarity as things get later on. They worked out the heart system in terms of losing your run. There are so many things. We've got hero skills properly in the game now. They were there before, but they've reworked them over and over and over. They seem to be in a solid state now. They really did bring the game forward a lot in this last year. 2022, which is what we're on. And this was early 2022. We've seen a lot of stuff since, and it all seems to be good stuff. This is the Bazaar game that I want to be playing. 2020, this was the Bazaar game that got me to make content about the Bazaar. 2021 was a year of new wave after new wave after new wave of development. 2022, this is the Bazaar game that I want to be playing now. This is my favorite Bazaar game. And I'll tell you why. And this is a very meta reason why. There is a reason why I am making a tier list of Bazaar games. Because the content well has run dry. The content well hasn't necessarily run dry because there's nothing I could do, but because I so desperately now want to be playing this game. I've waited so long for it, and it now looks so complete. I could just reach out and touch it. I could just, like, the game is in such a complete state that you could see yourself playing it easily. Obviously, it still needs balance. Obviously, there's still lots of art missing. There are still some background systems missing that they want to implement. But the core of the game is there. The game could be played, and I want to play it. The game is, in essence, is finished, right? There's just a little bit more they need to do. So 2022 is my favorite Bazaar. 2022 is when we should get the Bazaar. November Hope, November Copium, 2022 Copium in general. And I guess with that, we only have one thing left. And that's 2020 something. That is the Bazaar being released, not this year. With the Bazaar in such a great space, as of February 2022. That's the last view of the game we got. February 2022. There have been a lot of shifts within the team. Fair enough. If it's going to be released later than 2022, I think this has to be our contender for B. The game is going to be great. I am going to love playing this game. But the more and more it gets delayed, especially now, the game is ready to go. Just get it done. If we get any more reworks of any more systems, any more big systems, that is a huge blow for the game and will knock it down into B. There is such a thing of over-polish. I know if you look at a Blizzard game, you might be like, there's no way you could over-polish something. Fair enough. Blizzard have their own way of polishing a game beyond belief. But how many balance changes have they made to Hearthstone, to Overwatch? Those games have been changed drastically over the years while released. I think we're now at a point, and a lot of this comes from the recent Jules Joy rework. The Jules Joy rework, to me, very, very good idea. Brilliant idea. I think they nailed it with what they needed to change. However, that's definitely a change that could have happened when the game was live. Right? It's not like... I mean, they even do it in Hearthstone, but it's not as bad and shitty in Hearthstone as when you've collected all these incredibly powerful cards and then they nerf them because they were overpowered. And then you've basically got useless cards. It's not like that in the Bazaar. You buy a character. Sure, you might buy Jules because she's overpowered as fuck because Joy didn't care about shielding, healing, anything. If they nerf Jules, though, they're not going to make her completely useless. They're going to want her to be competitive. So you've still got all of her competitive cards as well as her now less competitive cards because you just owned all of them straight away. So yeah, I think 2022 has to be the year for the Bazaar. If we're getting delayed into 20-something later, then we start to look at, okay, they are over-engineering now. They have maybe a fear of pushing this game live. I don't know. I think we're in a good place. Don't take this too negatively. Even if it is 2023, early 2023, we're still good. That's still my S tier 2022 game, whatever. That's just a delay because marketing or another something. The reason why I put 2020 question mark in B is because I fear for this game getting over-engineered before it's released. This is almost doing the opposite of what every other game does, which is like, oh, we've got the basics of the game down. Let's throw it out into alpha and earn all of our money already. The Bazaar's doing the polar opposite. The Bazaar had an alpha ready 4 years ago. Let's get the game out so we can all enjoy our S tier 2022 Bazaar. I know you're all there with me. I know everyone is excited to play this game. And the best thing you can do is to continue to show your support for the game. Subscribe to this channel, obviously, but also jump into the main Bazaar Discord, let them know that you're excited and you're waiting for the game. Comment on their old YouTube videos, or at least their most recent YouTube videos. Let them know that you missed hearing about the Bazaar, let them know that you're waiting for the Bazaar, that you're hyped for it. Let them know you're waiting, and maybe it'll come. But until then, if you're waiting for the Bazaar, then you should probably check out some more gameplay. We have a load of gameplay on the channel, because we've recorded every single inch of it that we have. So go check that out, and I'll see you in the next video.